Looking at what you were just talking about and the same stuff that Ian was just talking about, I mean, honestly, the way I see it is it's about the complexity of systems that continue to grow, right? It's almost like that entropy of the systems. How do, from both of your perspectives, how do we build structure around these systems so that it doesn't run away from us? Whether you're talking about vulnerabilities, you're talking about the data and the ability to analyze it, where do you feel like we should start?
Yeah, I feel like just to I'll hop in and then pass to Ian, but I feel like for me it's all about identification. Without really understanding what we've got, it's going to be so difficult to protect that picture. So a lot of that is sort of that security 101, but without understanding where our systems exist, it's going to be really difficult to map where those vulnerabilities might touch and who might have access to them to be able to exploit them.
So one of the things I would, and it came up during a meeting with a customer of ours yesterday, is it feels like there's overarching preponderance of focus on AI right now, and a lot of the fundamentals are being overlooked. I'm kind of interested in y'all's perspective. I mean, not exactly related to your talks, but just in general, foundational standard security, what we've always done for the past 20 years, obviously with, a lot of modifications. Do you feel AI is starting to eclipse, that everyone's chasing it and losing a little bit of focus on standard security and response, forensics, all of that stuff combined?
I certainly do. I have issues with AI being overly involved in investigations and examinations. Like, I don't see it's ever going to take over the role of the examiner. It can certainly help, but there are lots of companies, lots of examiners who are putting way too much stock, in my opinion, into AI and how it's going to affect examinations moving forward.
Yeah, I think for me, when I put my architect and engineering hat on, for me it is still very much about the fundamentals, because without proper password identity and access management processes, procedures, really having a dynamic access model in place, it becomes really difficult to make sure that we're protecting assets, especially as our digital ecosystem continues to grow. Because I feel like we're going to have to consume AI in some places, especially as developers and building products. But for me, on the security side, it's always like, okay, if I know that we're going to have more systems, I know that it's going to continue to grow. Where do I want to make sure that I've got automation in place to make sure that I'm protecting those systems as they come online?
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And I'm glad you guys said that, because that was actually a perspective of the customer too, when it came to, just skill building and foundations. And it's like, we need to validate someone's skills. And a lot of it is 99% is foundational. We're, struggling just on cloud. We're struggling just on how do we know they have the fundamentals of forensics. Ian, are you familiar with the story of Forensicator Pro, just as an aside?
Not, no.
So do you know who Obi Carroll is from DOJ? He's a SANS instructor. Have you ever heard of him?
I believe I have. Yep.
So he's one of the ones that initially did probably one of the first podcasts that was out there for digital forensics. He and Brett Padres. This is literally back in 2008, 2009 timeframe. And they did this podcast on April 1st, in which they described this automated forensics capability that was going to be the end all, that you just put data into it. You ask it a bunch of questions. Out, it's going to pop a report. It sounds like you're describing what an AI capability is. What was fascinating about this, they were talking about this program called Forensicator Pro. And what ended up happening is most people listen to the podcast not on April 1st, which that was the joke. So what ended up happening is, almost for the next 3 years, OB would get calls. It's like, I'm trying to find Forensicator Pro online. I want to buy this tool. I can't find it. And it just ended up being really funny, because that name, Forensicator Pro, was the genealogy trace back into why we call people forensicators. Because it takes the human to do what Forensicator Pro was aiming to do. But, like what you're just mentioning there is like, it's 2025. I'm really dating myself here, in terms of when that initial thing came out. And, hey, a lot of people think we're going to be able to match that capability, fairly quickly. And I tend to agree. It's like, it still takes a human driving, asking creative questions to be able to get there, but they need that fundamental in forensics to be able to ask those creative questions. Same thing, Nikki, you're saying the fundamentals in architecture, fundamentals in security, that you may be able to have a much more complex answer, but if you don't know the question and creative thing to ask, how are you going to even get to that point where even, able to, ask the AI capability to design it? Anyways, I'm rambling on. It's like I'm interested in going back to Chris here for the next question, but yeah, it just was a topic of conversation in the halls here last couple of days.
And, let's double click on this question from the audience, because I think it's an important one, and I think it applies to more than the forensics tools, but we'll have that be the subject for now. But how do we ensure that AI-powered forensic tools comply with cybersecurity standards for the CIA triad?
Oh, this is a good one. Go ahead, Ian.
I'm just going to say transparency is the only real answer I have there. I know from my point of view, whenever we're employing AI in our tools, we try to be transparent. We'll tell you what it's doing, what it's being used for, and leave it up to the user to decide if that's a feature that they want to actually make use of, and if it's one that they are, by policy allowed to use.
Yeah, that's and on the, when I put my sort of my technical, I'm building a product hat on.
Right.
My thing is just it's the similar secure by design principles that I'm using if I'm developing anything, right? Like I want to make sure that I'm going through the proper paces, especially up front, because I think like most things, we continue to see this, it's more difficult to add security at the end. So it's better to implement whatever we can up front and sort of build that capability in early on. But I also like to follow whatever framework I'm using, depending on what the environment is. I like to follow that framework because a lot of the same principles, like if I was using the NIST 853 to make sure that I was aligning with, federal requirements, I'm still going to leverage some of that mindset, the risk management framework, something like that to help sort of back up what I'm doing to make sure that I'm implementing it. Even if the technical controls are a little bit different because I'm leveraging AI, the principles are going to be the same.
There's a, I don't know, this could be in its own like slash, offshoot that we're gonna end up having another hour or two long discussion on. But I appreciate both of those answers to this because it's such a complex topic overall. But going back to this, and I think a lot of folks struggle with this in general because everyone has a personal device attached to work now. Work arguably has a choice whether or not they're going to have a partial ownership of the device with device restrictions or not. But considering how crucial mobile devices are for authentication stack, I'm paraphrasing this question up at the top because it's very important to highlight this. Will attackers, and I think we know they are, but will attackers continue to try and exploit on a mass scale using AI, targeting these devices that are attached to the hip and contain all of your data and also contains the keys to get into your large scale organizations? What do you think?
I don't have a good answer for that. I think, AI is going to be utilized more for that kind of attack. I don't know how. That's not really my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think I think absolutely. I don't know how many other people get all those smishing, all those texts from the, in Maryland here, it's the Easy Pass or the toll pass. So I think we're absolutely going to see more of it because smishing continues to be one of those, just like regular, phishing, right? Not even spear phishing types of attacks. But just leveraging AI to build and create your phishing emails, it makes it so easy. You don't have to sit and try to craft what you want. You just go and ask, hey, I want to create a phishing email that does this or that, or I'm interested in this data. How do I write this? So I do think it continues to be, especially from people's mobile devices, where we, have password keepers and things like that. For sure, it definitely changes the exposure management level, makes it a little bit higher, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it definitely speaks to both of your talks, the way things are starting to become more and more integrated. more data, more touch points, and potentially a broader attack surface. I think this next question is a great philosophical discussion. I mean, I think it does sort of interrupt the status quo, but I'd be curious to hear what you all think. But with the rapid growth of AI and advanced technologies, isn't it becoming a threat to the daily life and survival of the common person?
Ooh, yeah. It's I will take I'll take this with this question with like a little different lens on it. Um, I think there's pros and cons to any technology, right? There's definitely advantages that we can get by leveraging AI. There's a number of tools out there that can make our lives a little easier. But yes, I do think that, just like with any other tool that we've seen in the past, there's good and there's harm, right? The ethics of AI is such a massive topic for a reason. I think there are a lot of really good ethical discussions around how we should use it, how we should build it, how we consume it, how we create it. So yes, I think the ethical conversation around AI consumption and creation is super important.
Yes, certainly the misinformation aspect of the AI is that we're already seeing it daily, and often it's used for fun and being misidentified as real data, but clearly it could be used, and it is being used to for more nefarious means. Like,
What do you think? I sit there and think about this all the time, and if we're sitting around a table, and I'm kind of going off script here instead of just like asking a question, is because we have four in there, we're going to be able to get to them. What are people missing when it approaches, and I'll just go to the standard security, like looking in the next 2 years. If you had your vision, either of you on forensics or security architecture, leading up to, convincing users what to do, like what are they, remove AI from the equation just for a second. What do we need to really accomplish in terms of, if you had your magic wand and you're in charge and you're saying, I need this vision in 2027, this needs to occur. Otherwise, we may have not progressed at all. What are those things for each of your different backgrounds that you would potentially choose? I know it's on the spot, but it's one of these things I'm kind of curious is, what are we missing in 2027? If you had, is it security fund investment? Do we have more training? Is it more, and that's not, because we're SANS, I'm actually very interested in personnel development. Funding goes from 4% to 8% of revenue. I don't know. I'm kind of curious where you guys stand on that stuff.
from my point of view, I don't think that any technological solution is going to replace examiners. So my answer would always be we need more examiners and more trained examiners with a deeper level of understanding.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and I do have to add my bias because I am an academic as well. But yes, I do think the more training and resources we have available, it's one of the reasons why I love talking about vulnerability chaining, because I think it's such an important topic for people to be aware of, to be able to understand and kind of understand in your own environment. So yes, I think the more training and getting the word out there, even just about security fundamentals, but how AI, kind of becomes injected or becomes a part of what we do as practitioners, I think is going to be super crucial for our next cyber defenders.
Yeah.
Chris, you too. I want to know what you're thinking.
Actually, this is part of what I was about to bring up. I think the genie's out of the bottle in more ways than one. One thing that I bring up quite often, because I have a lot of these conversations with different leaders about AI and their concerns and how how it's going to upend life, and whose job is going to be augmented, whose job is getting replaced. And I mean, there's a lot you could really unpack there. But what I'd say is this, and I bring this up as an example. Back in the day when everybody was using horses to get around and transport things, life was grand, and all of a sudden we have the automobile. And then the automobile, we tried to put governance and regulations around, like you can only drive 5 miles per hour because we don't want to replace these like good, fine horses. And obviously technology prevails and things start to change and shift. But then when I think about this, I think this is much more disruptive of our way of life. And a lot of folks say even more so than the internet itself. And so when I think about, how is it going to change our lives, I really can't even begin to understand, what are the secondary and tertiary effects of AI. But I'd love to hear from you all. Like, what do you feel like are the actual changes on the pros and on the con side from our daily lives?
I do think as a consumer of technology, whether you are a technical practitioner or you're just a consumer of technology, I think understanding how AI is integrated into applications, software, devices, all of that is going to be super crucial. And I say that as a consumer and a developer. I think it's going to be important to integrate into a lot of different professions. I see it on the academic side as well, right? As a professor, I need to be very aware of how students are using AI. How are they leveraging it, right? Are they using it to write papers? Are they using it to help be creative, right? Like how are we using it? So I think in a lot of spaces, it's going to fundamentally change our knowledge and skill set. And we kind of have to change, at least be aware of it, right? Like be prepared that it's going to be changing our professional lives for sure.
Chris, it's an interesting question. And like, I'll reframe it just a little bit. I get asked all the time, I'm sure you guys do too, is like, is Skynet going to happen? And everyone walks down this path initially, at least in my opinion, of, it's doom and gloom. I'm going to lose my job. Skynet's going to be turned on. We're going to have, Android fully develop its own, AI automated, killer bots, from Attack of the Clones. All these things kind of weigh on you. And I actually, when I answer this question, I actually do paint a very, bright, abundant future for, the implementation of AI. It's going to enable a lot more creativity. And, I go back to a little session I did for my kids' school is I'm actually doing again next week, working with the teacher, but I'm take pictures and I, just put a picture in front of them. I said, redo this picture, into an art form, try to think of a way to creatively express the picture. And what is interesting here is like every single time I'm going through these sessions with the kids, and they're seventh graders, I said, if you notice here, the thing that you're tapping into every single time you're touching AI is creativity. And it's really left brain, right brain, convergence here. And then my next exercise I'm doing with them is, I'd like you to take your favorite song, and then I'd like you to write down, 2 sentences of how you were feeling the last time you were happy or sad, give it an emotion, and then combine that. Again, I'm gonna, destroy earworm everyone here. So Pink Pony Club, for example, you have the song now Earwormed. And I said, use that as an example. I want a sad version of that, talking about, my soccer match last week. And watching AI go through and actually say, hey, I'm going to create a song for you. Then they start to see the enablement of it. And I think that's what society is kind of missing as the key benefit to a lot of this stuff is like that creative thing that you never were able to do before. Vibe coding, for example, like all 4 of us on here, when I guarantee, Ian, if you're sitting there saying, I have a problem, I know I'm using my unicorn skills, mobile device expert. I need this artifact. I have this data. I need it researched. I need something to parse it. You now have the capability to potentially develop that in 30 minutes.
Yep,
The
sure.
creative expert, combine those 2 things, boom, we're there. I'm curious, am I off? Am I like too like flowery about this, or what do you guys think? And I'm sorry about Pink Pony Club. Intentional, but not really.
I think that's fair. I think it introduces fast ways to do pretty cool things, but I think you still need the human element there to take pieces of what the AI has generated and to make it actually something special.
Yeah, I think if you're to kind of press on that a little bit, I think if you're looking for it to be a copy and paste, it's probably not going to work that way. But to your point, as far as creative and enablement, I have found that too in my creative writing. So I do a lot of academic writing, but I also do creative writing, and I find it as a great place to like bounce ideas off of and sort of kind of figure out if I'm in the right way, right? Even with technology. So I think it can be a good resource. For sure. And I think we're only seeing capability growing. Even in the last 3 months, there's been so many AI tools that have come out to help developers, to help all different types of professions. So we're definitely going to see more of that.
Yeah. Chris, answer your own question. Yeah, I'm curious. You don't dodge this by turning it into another question for them, but I need you to, what do you think? Your own question.
Yeah, so what I think about is I think about augmentation of the human. And what's funny is, and I wish I was making this up, but this is actually true. My senior thesis was on augmenting humans with artificial intelligence. And I still think it holds true today. I think you see a lot of folks that are talking about replacing humans, and I think that that's a mistake to even think of it that way. But I do think of it as augmenting the human, giving additional capabilities, right? Giving that Iron Man suit or that Jarvis for folks to do whatever it is that they're doing at the start. And I mean, and that's what I'm doing with my own company, Commandant AI. We're focused on augmenting the cyber operators, to enable them to do their jobs faster. But I think that, things are going to change, things are going to shift. There are going to be tasks that we no longer have to do ourselves. And then also, I always think there's going to have to be that human or operator in the loop. One of the things I used to have this bit of a philosophical debate with my good friend Ron Eddings is we would have this debate about automation and could you completely automate security operations? He said yes, and I would always say no, because even if you were to automate 90% of security operations, you'd still have to have that 10% human to either accept or deflect risk. And I honestly think that we're just going to be able to do more at the end of the day. I mean, you see some folks even talking about, the 2-day work week is coming because now we're going to be able to spend more time with our families and do more things because we're going to have robots and AI doing a bunch of our stuff for us. I think that we're far way off from that. I would love to see that reality in my lifetime, but we're still not there yet.
Well, there's a direct analogy there, and I have another statement right after this. Is one of my favorite books is, and again, I'm book recommendation, drop it in the channel, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And they go through history there, talking of two examples specifically in it. The word processor is like, look how much time it takes us to do typing and, feeding the paper through. What took us, 40 hours is going to be dropped to 4. And we're going to have all this, free time available. That obviously did not happen, but that book kind of covers that to a certain extent. It's a good book. I'm not going to dive into that, but I do want to talk about switching over because I think this one is something that from emerging threat goes back into a very personal one. And Chris, you'll see immediately why I'm going to focus on you, and Nikki. And Ian, I'm fascinated your answers to this. So I'm going to make a statement. If I had a vision over the next 2 years, the role of CISO and obviously being elevated up to this position currently over the past 2 years has been a brutalized, almost abused individual in the organizations that you're asked to wear a suit, be able to, do all your financials, be able to maintain revenue, be able to do more with less. And when there's an incident, you don't get medals. If your team detects something, that's great. Hey, we stopped an intrusion, but to everyone else, you failed. How do we fix the CISO problem? So in 2 years, this is a position people are not quitting in droves or quite quitting, which is a lot of folks doing out there. And I have a lot of my friends, and Chris, you do too, are saying never again to CISO. How do we fix CISOs from here into the future? I'm just throwing, Nikki, you're smiling a little bit. I could tell I hit a chord here.
I can say I've worked with some really incredible CISOs. So I've been very, very lucky to work with, some incredible people who integrate really well with the business, but are so super technically savvy, that they can really balance that, hey, I'm here to support the business, but I want to keep you secure. And to help you do the business, we're going to help you be secure, right? So it becomes this really lovely partnership instead of a, sort of a back and forward fight. Now I can say, even when I was on the IT side, because I did IT operations for a long time before I got into security, we ran into some of the same roadblocks, right? It's like we want to enable the business, we want to build great things, and then new tech comes, and you're constantly switching and swapping and building new things. So I think it's always going to be a little bit of that churn. But to me, with some of the great CISOs that I've worked with, they have this really nice balance of being on the cutting edge of technology and being able to push the business forward, but working really hand in hand with a lot of both technical people and the business side.
Chris, and now to you, with your CISO background, kind of fascinated because we've chatted about this. What is CISO 2027? If we were writing a paper today, what does that role look like, and how do we fix some of the major issues?
Yeah, I would say it's a multiple fold solution. And I think it's honestly a perfect case of fight fire with fire. Because I think that there's a lot of challenges that, take any CISO, and I mean, there's such a broad spectrum of CISO. You have the very, business focused CISO, you have the technical focused CISO, like a lot what Nikki was talking about. But I think that you need to somehow augment them to enable them to make decisions and take action faster, more efficiently. Give them the additional context, give their teams the additional context, that agency to be able to get things done. The ability to communicate to the rest of the business what you've been able to do, being able to distill like what is the value add that the security team has been able to bring to the business, because I don't think it's just an operational challenge that you have as a CISO. It's a communicative and a storytelling challenge as well. Being able to distill like why are we here, right? Because security is like doing their job whenever there's no problems, no incidents, right? But I mean, of course, that's a misnomer in itself. But how do you communicate that to the rest of the business to say like, hey, all of the investments that we've made from a security standpoint actually matter, and here's what we've been able to do. I think on the operational side and on the storytelling side, AI can help with both of those.
Yeah, 100%. It's challenging. I go back to the people issue in general. Is that if you take a look at, were we all RSA? Nikki, were you there last? I don't know. It seemed a blur.
Mm.
Whatever RSA was, there's this ROI that is on product and not people. Again, VC does not look for, hey, how do you invest in people? It is all about, is the product going to be able to enhance, or is it, hey, we have this detection thing you potentially remove. And that's something I think is inherently interesting about the cybersecurity, product development community, is that there's almost this marketing element that if you go, and I actually asked AI to go do this, is like examine all the marketing campaigns, how much of that is anti-personnel, that actually sounds really weird, anti-people, even just a hint of it, in comparison to, hey, this is human enhancement. And majority of products out there on the cybersecurity side, it is all about you're going to be able to reduce people costs by replacing it, with our little solution here, and you get, SLAs and all this other thing that, wrapped into it. And I'm not sure that we need to be careful from an industry that we're not projecting upon ourselves the balance that needs to be from, like Ian, you were saying, that you could have really good tools driven by really good people, but that tool is constantly marketing. It's not a good person. It's like our tool could do it, with the, cheapest labor that you could find out there. I'm curious, am I, like I said, I did some analysis of the AI, but I actually, now I'm aware of cognitive bias that occurs there. So I think AI is telling me what I want to hear, but I'm curious, is that accurate? Do you see that? Am I nuts?
The majority of marketing material I've seen regarding that has been, to augment the user. But I think rather than replace them. But at the same time, it really is saying that you can replace the skill set that the user typically has, and it makes their job so much easier now because we can do all of this that you don't need to do. So I've not seen it really focus on replacing the person, but certainly replacing the skill set.
Yeah.
I have a question. It might sound a little bit like science fiction, but I think it's sooner than we think. But with everything that we have agents, and we have agents that work together and can take action. They have computer vision. They're able to do things on the computer themselves. And then we also have a lot of folks that are looking to like, hey, I want to make this Chat GPT or this GPT speak just like me, and so I'm going to give it all this information about me and my actions and how I do things. Are we ever going to get to the point where agents are taking action that are potentially illegal? And then how do you defend against, I didn't do it, the AI did it in court? I mean, I think we have two pretty good folks here to kind of touch on that. Is that something that, people should be worried about, or am I a little crazy on that?
I think to a degree we've already seen similar kind of, to a much lesser extent. But how many times you do a Google search and it changes some of the words you've typed in because it thinks you've typed it wrong?
Right.
You may have, but there's an argument to be made that the user didn't actually search for that particular item. They searched for something similar and it was corrected by the tool. So yeah, I see that it's going to be challenged down the road for sure, and it's going to be an interesting court case when that does come up.
Yeah, I foresee similar to, regulations and frameworks, it takes a long time to kind of get to integrate change into them, even with AI being as prevalent as it is and changing so much. I do think it's going to take some time for policies, regulations, law to kind of catch up to all of the possible use cases or the ways that, things can go wrong, right? Because I think we're still sort of at that um, sort of the bleeding edge of what is possible. So there's a lot that's possible that could be good or could be bad, but I don't think we've seen the full scale of what that could look like. I equate it to, when gosh, was it 10 years ago? Was it longer than that? The big sort of like get to the cloud, right? Like get all of your systems in the cloud. And even at that time, I was still talking about cloud misconfigurations, right, for external facing assets, things like that. But at the time, I think there wasn't a lot of understanding. Even, it was like, oh, this is going to be safer and more secure. I'm just going to pick up all of my, my old vulnerabilities, my old legacy systems, and just pop them in the cloud, and that'll be great. And then we weren't really prepared for, the types of attacks that we were going to see, or the types of data exfiltration that we were going to see. So I think we're still on that tip of the spear, kind of figuring out what is possible. But I do see that being potentially problematic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna answer this question too, because I have an official answer to this. It's already been, if I'm litigating this, I would go back to case law that is all centered on the malware did it. And we've seen multiple examples where someone said, hey, I had no idea this child exploitation pictures were sitting in my system. Someone broke in, it got hacked, they set up the server, I had no idea it was there. But this is where proper forensics comes in, is that you could show the human interaction with those pictures. You could see someone opened up that picture and how they opened it up, through the program they opened it up. And that's one of the reasons I've just stated, from, the courses I was, teaching at that point, we did the posters, like the evidence of, human interaction, the evidence of program execution, evidence of, and if it's not, if a human touched it and executed it and you'd be in user assist, for example, and it would show in the prefetch. But if it's just malware, it'd probably be in prefetch. There's all these explainable things, but you'd still point back to the human. So the malware defense is akin to the AI defense, which is there's going to be artifacts that are going to be human generated versus AI generated. We just need to figure out what those are, just all over. It's the same problem.
Yeah.
Ian, I don't know if if you're like in agreement with that, but that's
totally in agreement.
Examiner.
Yeah. I mean, I focused so heavily on mobile forensics rather than computer forensics for the last, I don't know, good number of years that I forget about a lot of that kind of the prefetch stuff. But yeah, the malware defense is always been an argument that's in use, and yeah, the AI did it is definitely going to be a similar case.
So we're going to wrap up. Truly thank you guys for coming with us today and joining us and giving us your thoughts. Nikki, I believe I'm going to see you soon at Network Security.
I will see you soon.
That
Looking
is
forward to it.
September in Las Vegas. You're keynoting for us, I believe. And Chris is going to be
Yes.
interrogating you one more time at that event.
Can't wait.
Yep, it's going to be awesome.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, guys.
Thank you.